Good morning. Welcome to the Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live. I'm delighted once again to be joined by Sean Martin at Sean Martin TCW and Alison McConnell. How are you guys? You all right?
Not too bad, thank you.
Yourself?
Forgot to introduce myself there. I'm Anthony Haggerty. Twitter handle, but you probably all know that by now. Sick of my ugly mug. But first things first, we need to tell you all about our final chance and the last day, guys, to pick up this amazing offer of £1 for 2 months when you subscribe to the Celtic Way. You visit celticway.co.uk/subscribe and you hit the subscribe button. For £1, you'll get 2 months of free content and you'll see all sorts of wonderful things from Alison and Sean. You might even see some garbage and rubbish from mine. Isn't that right, Sean?
Yes.
So, yeah.
Can't say no for £1.
Give myself the lowest kind of bill in there, you know what I mean? So there you go. But no, it's all full of wonderful stuff. Man by man, tactical analysis, data, all you name it, ratings, big features, videos, it's all there. Big interviews. Right, that's the business side out the road, Sean. Lovely jubbly. Alison, yesterday, Scott Brown allegedly hung up his boots and the Celtic social media world went into a frenzy. Would you welcome Scott Brown back to Celtic Park?
It's an interesting question. I think I was surprised at the timing of it. I thought he would probably have waited until the end of the season. I think it's probably been made very clear that Jim Goodwin has his own ideas about his coaching staff and the direction he's taken the club. And I think it was well known that Scott Brown had gone to Pittodrie because of his friendship with Stephen Glass. But I thought it was interesting. I thought the timing, 8 games left of the campaign. I thought he would have hung on until May. I think clearly he has ambitions now about becoming his own man in a coaching sense. And I think it's an interesting question whether or not he goes to pursue that at Celtic or whether he does that elsewhere and he does it independently of the reputation and the association that he had with Celtic.
Sean, that reputation and association that he had with Celtic, as Alison mentions, captor, leader, legend, ... coach, / manager. Do you see that happening at Celtic? First and foremost, would you welcome him back? Do you see it as a kind of another step in his natural progression to becoming what he wants to be, or do Celtic want him back?
Well, first of all, I'm just going to read out this because I like reading out people that have just won a lot of stuff, really. But I mean, he's 36 years old now, but he spent 14 seasons at the club as a player, right? Won 10 league titles, 6 Scottish Cups, 6 League Cups, and then you've got all the individual awards, which was like 2 Players Player of the Year, Football Writers Player of the Year, 5 entries in the PFA Team of the Season, and of course, not for me to say, but he done it all with a cracking haircut. Talk about a career, but I mean, it's more remarkable that he done all that with, I think only 2 of those 22 trophies were not as captain, and I think you're unlikely to see that kind of combination of longevity and success many places in world football. So I think there's no doubt it would be a welcome return to the club. He's a likeable character as well. I mean, despite what people that have never really worked with him and that kind of thing before would like to paint him as, I think everybody, you listen to anybody that's worked with him and it's all praise and it's all really, really positive in terms of the kind of character he is off the park. What I would ask is, does all of that make an immediate return to Celtic a sensible option? I'm not actually that sure because there's a few things here. I mean, he's been steeped in first team level coaching now. I mean, it was a 2-year deal that he signed at the Dons. So if your argument is that he should be back at the club but potentially not at first team level, is a role with Celtic B or the youth teams again really going to cut it for him at this point? He was also linked to a managerial vacancy recently at St Mirren. I don't know how much substance there was to that, but nonetheless, that's the kind of level that he's kind of looking at, or at least the level that he's been linked with. So although it would be a return to Celtic, if it was a youth or a B team coaching role after being with the Aberdeen first team, is that really for him as a professional step? I'm not so sure.
That's a fair point, Alison, that Sean makes there, because I think we spoke off here and there is a vacancy for the under-18s, I believe, at Celtic at the minute. And I think he has previously coached with the under-23s. In terms of just coming back to Celtic and getting his foot back on that coaching run, do you agree with Sean that he might forgo that in order to get first team coaching somewhere else?
the first thing you'd have to say is that I think his playing career was a stellar career. Sean has just read out a catalogue there of trophies and trinkets, and you know what he offered. He was a player who grew into the Celtic captaincy. I think he would feel as though, he served the club with some repute. But I think it becomes a very different thing then when you go to do that and pursue a different ambition in terms of coaching. And I think it's almost about proving yourself again. It's about starting again in a very different vein. I think it doesn't automatically translate that if you have a very successful playing career, that you transition into coaching and management seamlessly. And I think there are countless examples that we could all call on to reference that point. So I think it's about cutting your teeth and proving that you have the necessary credentials to go and coach. And I think he probably may feel that he would be best served doing that away from Celtic and showing that he can stand on his own feet in a coaching sense.
Yeah, and I think also, Sean, that it's the emotional pull, isn't it, and the emotional sway that the Celtic fans feel for Scott Brown. But with 8 games to go in the season, I just don't think they want him to come in and impinge on anything that Ange Postecoglou is doing. And I don't think that would be the right move right now to get him back to the Celtic first team in a coaching capacity right now, per se. Maybe revisit it in the summer if he's still looking and look to bring him in then at the end of the season or for the new season.
I think that's a good point, and I think it's one worth considering. Without, I can see where you're coming from in terms of disrupting the balance that they've got just now. Adding a character as big as Brown with the amount of influence and stuff that he's got within the club. That's not to say, and it's not to be taken as necessarily a slight on Brown that's what's going to happen. It might not, might be the opposite. It might actually give them a wee boost in the last few games of the season. But I certainly take the point that is another way of looking at it in terms of if first team level is where he wants to be, then does it really make sense to bring him or anyone really? It could be anybody we're talking about here into the fold when things are going so well and they're just 8 league matches plus hopefully 3 cup games left. I mean, is there a chance, however well-meaning it might be, that it upsets the balance that the team and the coaches have found this season in the unbeaten run that they're on domestically?
Yeah, I mean, the sentimentality can be the undoing of football clubs, and it would be a sentimental and an emotional homecoming for Scott Brown if he were to come back to Celtic, Alison. But I just don't think that the timing's right. Just think that Ange and his men have got a job to do for the rest of the season, and the chips fall where they may.
I think they also have to consider that since Scott Brown left Celtic, there has been a changing of the guard. I think there's a new manager who's gone in. I know there are still a spine of players and coaching staff who are there, John Kennedy and Gavin Strachan, but even at chief executive level, you have seen changes. I think maybe hindsight is a wonderful thing. I think maybe had he wanted to transition into a coaching role last season, I think he may have become a part of Ange Postecoglou's backroom team. Had he been around the club, I think that may have been a more organic step to have made. I think it becomes difficult and different when you're stepping back in, having been out.
Excuse me, I'm about to sneeze what I thought it was. Yeah. Why'd you hold anything? Oh. Sorry, guys. I'm back in the room. I closed the blind there because the window cleaner was there and the dogs were going absolutely mental. So if you heard that, apologies for that. Yeah, Sean, there'll be pros and cons for this, Sean, won't there? There'll be the pro Scott Brown brigade, and I'm not saying that there's an anti-Scott Brown brigade out there in terms of the Celtic supporters, but it's maybe, a lot of people can see the benefits of it, as you said there, but a lot of people maybe not see. A lot of supporters maybe think, look, just wait till the summer and see where he is, and in the meantime, let him try and get something. If he doesn't, then he'd probably welcome back into the fold then.
I mean, that would be a sensible thing to do. I think, there's more to the whole scenario than simply, it's Scott Brown and it's Celtic, so it must be fine. It must be that's the way it's going to go. Isn't there? It's there's also other considerations as well. One I've been thinking, this is just me thinking though, that Sean Maloney's at Hibs just now trying to instill a new regime and a philosophy, and it's not too dissimilar to the way Stephen Glass went in at Aberdeen to try and instill a new regime and philosophy and brought Brown along with him to do that. Now, I'm not saying he would go there as a player coach necessarily, but Maloney and Brown have spoken incredibly highly of one another on several occasions over the years, including just before Maloney took that role with the Celtic under-20s a few years back. So there's other options out there for him. I'm not saying that Hibs want him necessarily. I'm just saying there's other considerations apart from Celtic. He doesn't have to go to Celtic in any capacity, never mind what I was saying about the first team thing. And then there's also, I've seen a few suggesting Neil Lennon. He's just took a role over in Cyprus with Amona Nicosia. Is there a potential there? There's plenty of people that would like to add, I'm sure, would like to add Scott Brown to their coaching team. So it's not just as simple as, it's Celtic and it's Scott Brown, so it's a foregone conclusion for me.
I don't know about you, Alison, but I'd love to see him go to Ammonia Nicosia, and I'd love to be a fly in the wall in that dressing room if you had a management team of Neil Lennon and Scott Brown. How good would that be? Just to listen to one of those team talks.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, I think when Neil Lennon went back to Celtic, Scott Brown had a fairly commanding and authoritative role in the Celtic dressing room by that point. I think he'll probably take his time. I think the next move, I think he might be quite discerning about what his next move is, because I think it can be quite a fragile coaching journey. I think people will be looking with some interest because he obviously goes in with quite a big reputation wherever it is he goes. I don't think he'll need to be in any rush to make a decision. I think he might bid his time just until the summer, until the end of the season, when you know that there tends to be changes round about clubs, and just consider the options that are there. But I don't think there's any pressing need to jump into something or to take the first offer that comes. I think he'll maybe want to take a bit of stock, reflect on the career he's had, and then decide about what avenue he wishes the coaching career to take.
Yeah, I can understand what you're saying, Sean, with the Hibs link as well. And obviously, there's a Hibs link to Scott Brown as a player. And if Sean Maloney wanted him, it's maybe something that he would maybe ask the question of Scott Brown. But it's a strange one, isn't it? Because I think your heart certainly says you'd like to see Scott Brown back at Celtic, but your head is saying, but just not at this minute in time when everything's ticking along nicely.
I think that pretty much sums it up. For what it's worth, I think, I kind of referenced earlier on, I think all the stories about how likeable and how influential he is in a dressing room environment, I realise a coach isn't necessarily the same as a dressing room environment. In fact, it's definitely not the same. But I still think that kind of personality would be an asset to have back at the club in some capacity. Though for me, it does make sense for it to be first team, given that his coaching career trajectory has already taken him there. But that for me would probably mean that it waits until the season's over. The thing is, he's likely not even really wanting a break from it all, to be honest. He comes across as one of those guys who just can't get enough of the football, really. I covered Aberdeen women for a while when I lived in Aberdeen, and we kind of overlapped when Scott Brown was there for a while, and he was there at a couple of the games more than once, taking those in after being about Cormac Park all day prior to it and stuff. So the chances are, whatever his next step is, he probably doesn't want to wait about in an ideal world. But in saying that, it's actually not all that long until the end of the season anyway now, is it?
Yeah. No, Alison, I'll ask you the question. Do you see Scott Brown back at Celtic in a coaching capacity?
I don't know that I'm qualified enough to answer that, is the honest reply. I think it very much depends on both parties. I wouldn't be privy just now to either thoughts. I think very much it comes down to whether he wants to be his own man and whether he wants to go and manage at a lower league level, if that is an option, or go and pursue coaching at a particular level. And I think that's a differentiation, I think, for him to make about whether he wants to be a manager ultimately and go in feet first, almost go in and test the water at a lower club and see how he fares, or whether he wishes to learn his trade first of all as a coach, and then maybe moving up the ladder, going sideways towards a management role. And I'm not sure that I can answer where it fits just now.
Same question to you, Sean. I know Richard Taylor says he would like to have him under big hands because he would learn about real coaching. What's your thoughts on that?
On the comment, I think it's a good shout, actually, because it's I'd imagine that probably a lot of the coaches that work under Ange not only embrace a new way of kind of looking at the game, but also of coaching the game. And as a young coach, because you remember as soon as he retires, he's now a young coach rather than an older player. I think that would be beneficial for him as well. I mean, whether to say that's what happens or not, I don't know. I'm obviously, if Alison's not qualified to say, I'm certainly not. But it's
I'm just putting it to you in the spot. You know what I mean?
It would be interesting, and it would be good. It would be good for him to have on his CV for me. I've got an interesting one. I'll throw back at you, Tony, to put you in the spot here. I think that's an interesting question. Obviously, none of us can answer it accurately, but I think it's an interesting thing to consider.
Yeah, well, Callum has been his own man since Scott Brown left, but when you talk about Sean Maloney speaking highly of Scott Brown, Cal Mack thinks the world of Scott Brown. He learnt so much, he said, and I don't think it would cause too much friction, to be honest, if the two roles were demarcated. Callum's still a player and he's a captain of the club. Scott would be a first-team coach, and I still think he would have influence there, and they would be able to bounce off each other very well. I think Cal Mack thinks the world of Scott. So
I think you're probably right, but what comes to, and it's not even it's a false equivalence, but it's come in my head because of your you've done a wee piece that people should look out for, referencing the late great Bill Shankly, and the Shankly page. You know where I'm going with this? The Shankly Paisley connection when Paisley took over. But Shankly still kind of was there, still hung about, and it wasn't actively undermining him, but it was almost taking the shine away from the leadership he could show, that kind of thing. I think that might be what Ewan's getting at. Would he actually embrace him being there so soon after taking the captaincy himself, even if it wasn't in a playing capacity? That's why I think it's an interesting question.
It is possible, yeah, and I get that. I get that Shankly reference too, and I think Bill eventually had to be told to stop coming round. Because the players were referring to him as boss, so it's one of them, isn't it? So, yeah, there could be that element to it as well. But speaking of Ange, Alison read today, or yesterday as well, that Ange isn't giving any of the Celtic players any days off between now and the title running. Do you agree with that?
I don't think it matters whether I agree with it or not. I think if I disagree, there's no union that's coming in to say you've got 3 days off this week. No, I think you can see his point. I think it's been such a cluttered fixture list, particularly since the resumption of games from the winter break, that I think there's probably very little time to actually work on coaching. I think when you have 3 games in a week, you're probably ticking over and preparing immediately for one game or recovering after a game. I think this is probably the first real opportunity there may be to do some tactical work, to do some organisational work, to maybe work on key concepts. So I think you can understand why he would want them in. I think you're coming now into peak time of the campaign. We spoke about this earlier in the week about how he has previously spoken of trying to ensure his team's peak for the run-in. Now I'm assuming that means in a physical sense, but also in a preparatory sense, in that everyone knows their jobs, the philosophy, where they're going. I think the recurring theme this season has been a weakness still at set pieces defensively. I think it leads to a level of unnecessary anxiety at times in games. And I think if you can sort that, I mean, you would have to qualify it by saying it from middle to front. Celtic at points have been scintillating this season, but there are areas, of course, that I think they can still work on, and I'm sure he'll want to use this week, and I think it's a free midweek next week for them too, just to maybe work in some ideas and get a few points across.
I go along with that wholeheartedly, Sean. I think set pieces could be key. Might work on the defensive side of that, and just as Alison says, to get some more work into them on the training ground and just keep peaking until the end of the season.
Just to butt in there too, and just make another point, like when we speak about the fragility of Celtic at set pieces, I thought it was quite notable last week. That was 2 goals in 2 successive games that Celtic scored from set pieces. It's been a while. I think set pieces have been a criticism too in an attacking sense. I think corners have been wasteful in many games, but I thought there was a slight change over recent weeks, and I thought it was notable that the last 2 games brought forth goals from set pieces.
They're learning at one end, Alison, just need to learn at the other.
I would disagree with that. I still think that, I mean, they'd already scored a few from set pieces. It wasn't necessarily that they hadn't scored. It's more for me when I was like, because I sat and watched them all basically. and I still don't, even the two that they scored from recently, it's not been pre-planned routines. It's not been corner routines. It's been profiting from the kind of chaos of just sticking the ball in the mixer, which is quite not disappointing because they all count. But it's for me that there has been no change. It's just that they happened to score from two of them. The defensively, I mean, they conceded from a throw-in as well. So I would agree that is somewhere that they need to improve. And I would agree, similar to you, Tony, what you said, I'd agree wholeheartedly with what you said initially, Alison, which is the benefit of having the 3 midweeks. Ange himself said that is not so much in terms of actual days off, so to speak, but not just focusing on recovery between games. The 3 midweek, as you said, Alison, allows them to touch on the key principles again, get a wee bit more of the tactical stuff, whether that's set pieces or not, and just in general, 2-3 midweeks, as much as Tony, as much as me and you were banging the drum for going deep in Europe, there's no denying once you're out of Europe and Rangers are still in Europe, that it becomes something you can use to your own advantage, and this is exactly the scenario that happens.
Yep, I agree with that as well. Yep, very much so. Really enjoyed the bulletin today. Really took up a fair amount of time. And it left for me to say again, take advantage. This is the last day and the last chance, last opportunity to take advantage of the deal that you can see at the left and right hand side of our screens. Subscribe to the Celtic Way. It's £1 for 2 months for some wonderful content. And if you go to celticway.co.uk/subscribe, hit the subscribe button. It really is that simple and easy, and it costs you £1 for 2 months of wonderful content. Alison, as ever, top stuff today. Appreciate it. Always. Sean, thanks a lot for your contribution and all the comments, guys, coming in. You see them coming up. We try and read them out, but sometimes we just get engrossed and lost in the chat. But you can understand that. But we appreciate your contribution always. Have a cracking day, guys, and we shall reconvene tomorrow, as ever. Same time, same back channel. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, Tony. Cheers, guys.
Take care.